Hey, this is your cricket from the future here. Because the NFL freaking hates me, I had to remove those video clips, so I'm sorry. Talking about one of the best defensive players, if not the best defensive player that has ever played the game of American football, Reggie White. I want you to know that the clips that are going to be playing in the background of this video as I'm talking about his life and his history are real game footage. Please pay attention to the number 92. That is Reggie White, of course. And you will see this man absolutely maul offensive linemen and quarterbacks, as is his purpose. You should also know a little bit of the terminology since it's a football video. A sack is when you bring the quarterback down for a loss of yardage behind the line of scrimmage or behind where the ball starts. You should also know, just in case you're not really familiar with any of these terms, a fumble is when the ball is knocked out of the player's hand and can be recovered since the player wasn't tackled to the ground before he dropped the ball. And an interception, of course, most people should know what that is. You get the ball when it's thrown. I myself find Reggie White to be endlessly fascinating, mainly because defensive end was the position that I played in football. And I didn't have a whole lot of success. I wasn't terrible, but I wasn't really good either. I think I recorded maybe one sack and a couple in practice, which is really the measure of your talent. Most defensive ends and defensive linemen are only there because they're big men. Again, just to plug up a hole and keep a running back or anything from coming through that line, you're supposed to plug the gap. Without further ado, let me get into Reggie White. There will never be another defensive end like Reggie White. Reggie White was born December 19th, 1961 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Reggie's mother, Thelma Collier, told Sports Illustrated that when Reggie was 12 years old, he announced that he wanted to be two things: a football player and a minister. Reggie played high school football at Howard High School under Coach Robert Pullum, a former defensive lineman at Tennessee. During his senior year with the Hustlin' Tigers, Reggie recorded 140 tackles, 88 solo, and 10 sacks, and received All-American honors. He was rated the number one recruit in Tennessee by the Knoxville News Sentinel. Reggie White was 6'5", or 1.96 meters, and 300 pounds, or 136 kilograms. This is a rare stat. Even in the NFL, defensive ends are one of the most frequent sackers in American football, but those defensive ends get about 10 sacks per year. Reggie did this in high school. Traditionally, defensive ends are in a three-point stance, with both of their feet on the ground and their hand in front of them, with their other hand resting somewhere on their thigh or towards their hips. They have their free hand cocked back ready to punch an offensive lineman, or sometimes they're in a two-point stance, like a strong safety, so they can keep containment. In this case, you're normally having your hands square to your hips. Some defensive ends play this position due to their size. They close down the gap so the running back has no hole to run through. Other ends play the position due to speed and agility, and they're used to rush the quarterback. Most of the time, defensive players don't get a lot of shine in football, even though they are very important. Or if they do get shine, it's mainly your cornerbacks or a linebacker. You rarely see a defensive lineman as phenomenal as Reggie White was. White played college football at Tennessee from 1980 to 1983. He had worked his way into the starting lineup by the end of freshman year, in which he registered 51 tackles, 32 solo, and 2 sacks, recovered 2 fumbles, and blocked a punt that set up Tennessee's first score in the team's 23-10 win over then-rival Georgia Tech. He was awarded the Andy Spiva Award, given annually to the Vols' most improved defensive player. As a sophomore during the 1981 season, White registered 95 tackles, a team-leading 8 sacks, and a team-leading 7 tackles for loss. He also blocked 3 extra point attempts. He had 10 tackles and 2 sacks, one of which resulted in a safety against Memphis State, and he was named the team's most outstanding defensive player for the game. For his performance in Tennessee's 10-7 win over Georgia Tech, which included a late fumble recovery that sealed the Vols' victory, he was named Southeast Lineman of the Week by UPI. White had 8 tackles in Tennessee's 28-21 victory over Wisconsin in the 1981 Garden State Bowl, and was named the game's best defensive player. At the end of the season, he was named to the sophomore All-American team by the Football News. White was named a preseason All-American going into the 1982 season, but was consistently bothered by an ankle injury that he had had prior, and his production dropped off. While he registered just 47 tackles, he nevertheless led the team with 7 sacks and was third only to teammates Mike Coffer and Carlton Peoples in big defensive plays. His best game of the season came in the Vols' 24-24 tie against LSU, in which he registered 8 tackles, including a sack and a 4th down stop. He had 8 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble in Tennessee's 28-22 loss to Iowa in the 1982 Peach Bowl. Reggie was determined to improve upon what he considered a disappointing junior campaign. Reggie erupted during his senior season in 1983, registering 100 tackles, 72 solo, a school single-season record of 15 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and an interception. Although Pittsburgh defeated Tennessee 13-3 in the season opener, Reggie consistently kept the Panthers' offense off balance, in spite of being lined up against the Panthers' All-American offensive lineman, Bill Fralick. He had 2 sacks in Tennessee's 31-6 win over New Mexico, and a school single-game record of 4 sacks in the Vols' blowout over the Citadel. White was named Southeast Lineman of the Week for his performance, which included 12 tackles, 3 sacks in Tennessee's 26 win over LSU. And he twice sacked Alabama quarterback Walter Lewis in Tennessee's 41-34 win over the Tide. In Tennessee's 30-23 win over Maryland and the 1983 Florida Citrus Bowl, White sacked heralded Maryland quarterback Boomer Esiason in the second quarter, knocking him out of the game. White was a consensus All-American SEC Player of the Year and a Lombardi Award finalist. Lombardi Award is awarded to the best defensive linemen or defensive players in the college league. During his tenure at the University of Tennessee, Reggie registered 293 tackles, 201 solo, 32 sacks, 19 tackles for loss, 4 fumble recoveries, and 7 batted down passes. His 15 sacks in a season in 1983 remain a school record to this day. His mark of 32 career sacks remained a school record until it was broken by Derek Barnett during the 2016 season. His school single-game record of 4 sacks against the Citadel in 1983 stood until 2013 when Corey Miller had 4.5 sacks against Kentucky. After his college career, White was chosen by the Memphis Showboats in the 1984 USFL Territorial Draft, and the opportunity to play Pro Bowl in the same state where he went to college was enough enticement for him to sign. He played for Memphis for 2 seasons, starting in 36 games. As a member of the Showboats, he racked up 23.5 sacks, 1 safety, and 1 forced fumble recovered for a touchdown. When the USFL collapsed in 1985, Reggie took a salary cut in Philadelphia. The Eagles signed him to a 4-year deal after buying out the remaining 3 years on his Memphis contract. White was still considered an unproven entity, but his anonymity did not last long. He joined the Eagles after the 1985 season had begun, missing the first few games. When he finally did start, he made 10 tackles and 2.5 sacks in his first game. By the season's end, he had turned in 13 sacks in as many games, and he was named NFC Defensive Rookie of the Year. He played with the Eagles for 8 seasons. He played in 121 games and picked up 124 sacks, becoming the Eagles' all-time sack leader. He also set the Eagles' regular season record with 21 sacks in a single season. The lowest numbers of sacks ever recorded in Philadelphia was 11 in 1989. Reggie also became the only player to ever accumulate 20 or more sacks in just 12 games. He set an NFL regular season record during 1987 by averaging the most sacks per game, with 1.75. Over the course of his tenure with the Eagles, White accumulated more sacks than the number of games he played. After a sack, he would ask the QB if he was all right. The QB would basically say, yeah, and Reggie would say, bless you. Then Reggie would go bless him again. In 2008, he was voted by ESPN Sports Nation as the greatest player in Eagles franchise history. In 1981, he set the record for most passes defended in a single season by a defensive lineman with 13, a mark that has since been broken by J.J. Watt. In 1993, Reggie became a free agent. His transaction started a new era in NFL of player-requested free agencies. He was signed by the Green Bay Packers and agreed to the terms of a 4-year contract worth $17 million. At the time, he was the third highest paid player in the NFL, trailing only John Elway and Dan Marino. Dan Marino, of course, a legendary quarterback. This is highly unusual for a defensive player to earn this much. He played for the Packers for 6 seasons. In the middle of a game, a young offensive tackle started trash-talking Reggie and swore at him profusely. Reggie responded by saying, "Don't you cuss me." This got the young lineman talking more and more, swearing at Reggie. Each time, Reggie replied with the same answer, "Don't you cuss me." Eventually, Clyde Simmons, Gothic, Jerome Brown, and Seth Joyner attempted to calm Reggie down as they could see how mad he was getting. But Reggie was able to keep his cool. In response, Reggie simply told the young lineman, "Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming." Before he lined up for the next play, Golick told the guard in front of him, "Just to let you know, I'm taking a play off. I need to see this." As the young offensive lineman approached the line of scrimmage, he continued to trash talk and cuss at Reggie. Once they got in their stances, Reggie repeated, "Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming." When the ball was snapped, Reggie yelled, "Here comes Jesus!" and hit the lineman in the chest, shoving him back into the cornerback for a sack. Reggie then stood up over the young lineman and said, "I told you don't cuss me." Reggie knocked up another 69 sacks to become, at that time, the Packers' all-time leader for that category. He is now third behind Clay Matthews III and Kabir Jabba-Bialama. White was also just as valued for his role as a team leader. He helped the Packers win a Super Bowl with a game-ending sack. During the game, White had 3 sacks to set up a single-game record in the Super Bowl. That Super Bowl championship went on to be Reggie's only championship game ever, and his only championship ever won in his entire career. Reggie was named the NFL Defensive Player of the Year for the second time in 1998. In 2000, Reggie came out of 1 year of retirement and started all 16 games for the Carolina Panthers. He had 5.5 sacks and 1 forced fumble while on the team. He again retired at the end of the 2000 season. At the time of retirement, Reggie was the NFL's all-time sack leader with 198. He has since been surpassed by Bruce Smith, who accumulated 247 games played. Counting his time in the USFL, Reggie has had 221 sacks in professional football, making him professional football's all-time sack leader to this day. White has also recorded 3 interceptions, which he returned for 79 yards. He recovered 19 fumbles, which he returned for 137 yards and 3 touchdowns. His consecutive 9 seasons with at least 10 sacks remain an NFL record. He was named an All-Pro for 13 of his 15 seasons, including 8 as a first-team selection. Reggie White is considered by many to be one of the best defensive NFL football players in history. While at the University of Tennessee, Reggie had become involved with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He expressed an interest in becoming an evangelist as early as his sophomore year in 1981. He became an ordained Baptist minister during this period. He had acquired the nickname the Minister of Defense by the time he was a senior. In Reggie's last year of football, a friend reportedly gave him a CD from Masonic teacher Monte Judah following his retirement. White began studying the Torah and became observant of Masonic theology. Reggie also studied Hebrew under Nehemiah Gordon. In October 2003, White was interviewed by Masonic teacher and televangelist Michael Rood. He discussed his studies of the Torah. The interview was broadcast on February 4th and 6th, 2005, on the Sky Angel cable channel. Reggie went on to co-produce Rood's half-hour A Rood Awakening from Israel TV programs. Following Reggie's death, the January 2005 edition of Masonic magazine, Yehovah, was dedicated to him as a Masonic believer, leading to confusion regarding Reggie's true religious beliefs. Some reported incorrectly that Reggie had abandoned Christianity and replaced his beliefs with that of Judaism. Reggie White touched many, quite literally, leaving them pancaked on the floor. But also, Reggie White was a beacon as a defensive lineman. Like I said before, defensive linemen are very rarely this good. And to be named All-American and All-Pro multiple years in a row and record records for the amount of sacks that he obtained is truly remarkable. Reggie White died at the age of 43 due to cardiac arrhythmia. He was taken from this world far too soon, but his impact still remains in the NFL today. I've been your Noisy Cricket. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Respect for a long time, I tell you, this young man better continue to give us some respect, I tell you.